So what's good, everyone? This your main correspondent, Alan Taylor, and I'm back in the broadcast room. And yes, you clearly see the title of the broadcast and you see the lady on the screen. So now I didn't dive too deep here because I was curious and I wanted to watch this right along with you guys. I think it's like, it's a little lengthy video, but we're going to dive off into this. So she's saying basically that Donald Trump said that the only reason why certain things are not going down is because his own mind, and he's able to do these things regardless of anything. So I mean, that's how I'm interpreting, just get you short version. So we're going to dive off into this and we're going to see what's going on. Quarters, nickels, and dimes.
When Donald Trump says the only thing stopping him from doing whatever he wants in the international community is his own mind, he's really not that wrong. I'm going to get the board. And yes, this is a Tim Hortons varsity jacket. This is a really hard one to swallow, guys.
Damn.
I needed a new piece of chalk to help me through. First, we got to be honest about something. The U.S. is the last remaining superpower. This matters. What gives them this status? Their military, their economy, and let's be perfectly honest, their cultural domination. They don't send their army, they just send McDonald's, for crying out loud. Now, your question should be, what could possibly hold back the United States in the international system from doing anything they deemed appropriate? The answer so far hasn't been much. We can talk about their Constitution. A lot of people talk about their Constitution as it applies to the international system. It doesn't. The United States Constitution and every country's Constitution applies to its citizenry. What the United States government does in foreign international relations has nothing to do with their Constitution. Can they impeach them for things? Sure. Have they? Absolutely. Has any president been kicked out for the horrible things they've done internationally? No.
Wow. Hey, listen, look, and regardless of what's going on in this administration here, if we look back on previous administrations, listen, look, they've sent people, they've sent our troops and stuff other places and things like that. The Vietnam War, let's take that for example. When those troops got back, they were horribly treated and things like that. And this is because the Vietnam War technically was the first war to ever really be televised that hard. And it's just the truth. And they saw the carnage and stuff like that that had to happen over there. And a lot of things, of course, were, in our standards and things like that were inhumane, all types of stuff. So when those soldiers got back, they were treated very badly because they didn't really, because over here in America, by that point, we had really been sheltered from war. Listen, look, the Civil War and World War II were not televised how the Korean War was. So we didn't really see what these soldiers were really doing in these previous wars and things like that. And, when we went to Korea, it was a whole nother thing. Like the Koreans had, certain things going on over there. It just, the soldiers did get treated really horrible because they got sent to a war, that they thought that they was defending America's interests. And that's just the fact. Let's keep going here.
The only constitutional control Congress has is over the purse strings, the money. So if the president declares war or takes military action, after 6 months, Congress has to vote to pay for it. But once they're in it, once they're at war, nobody, including the guys on the other side of that fence or the other side of the aisle, wants to see the United States lose. So it's an awful lot of power to give to the president. This has always been true. We're just now talking about it. What about the United Nations? Everybody talks about the United Nations and its control on the international community. Why isn't the United Nations doing anything to stop the United States? This is a subclass, so you're going to have to mind map your way off the page. I'm going to talk about the UN for a second. The UN has 5 key structures. They have the General Assembly, the Security Council, the Permanent Security Council, ECOSOC, and the ICJ. This is a real crash course, so try to keep up. To understand the United Nations, you have to understand when it was created, 1945. In order to get people to join, states to join the United Nations.
Right. You know, anybody that knows anything about history, yes, the United Nations was created in 1945, definitely amongst the World War II era, you know, because of what, you know, the little mustache guy was doing was a huge problem amongst the world at that time. You know, a lot of nations did not agree with what that dude was doing, things like that. He was doing all types of crazy atrocities and, you know, deleting, you know, a lot of people, internment camps, stuff like that. He was doing a lot. And he thought that his race was the master race. And yeah, it kind of, you know, it is what it is here. It is what it is here. You know, shout out to my grandfather that fought in World War II. Right there, y'all see it. Right there, y'all see it.
Nations, they had to assure that each state would have sovereignty, and they had to make very special promises to some of the bigger countries. General Assembly, 194 countries-ish, all have a seat, all have a vote. In order to pass something in the General Assembly, you need a simple majority. Then it goes to the Security Council. The Security Council is made up of 15 members, 10 of which are elected for a 2-year rotational term. If it goes to the Security Council, it's going to be voted on. 60% of the Security Council actually needs to pass it for it to make it to the next level. Here's where it gets messy and everybody gets frustrated, but it's essential. Once past the Security Council, it goes to the Permanent Security Council. 5 superpowers at the end of World War II each got a permanent seat on the Security Council, and each of those countries has a veto, so can veto any UN action. Those 5 members are the United States, China, at the time the Soviet Union, now Russia, France, and Britain. Some people might ask, why do they get so much power? I'll tell you why. Because if they weren't granted more power of their status, they wouldn't have joined the UN. They don't join the UN. We don't create an international body to hopefully reduce tensions and have more diplomacy. Now let me be...
That makes sense to me too. If at that time, back then, definitely, you know, if those powers that be were not going to join the UN would have never manifested. They needed the technically what were, you know, the powers that be at that time, the United States, like you said, Russia, you know, China, stuff like that, you know, to really engage, because, you know, these places technically had the most land mass. And, you know, at that time, a lot of people were there in these strategical places. You know, notice she didn't mention like Rome or fucking, you know, like, you know, let's keep going though.
Crystal clear. It's because of the Permanent Security Council that the UN has been militarily stagnant, even though the United Nations isn't supposed to be a military force. It has been stagnant because every major conflict that goes on in the world today is a result of one of those 5 countries benefiting from, training, and supplying weapons to the countries actually at war. Technically, the only time that the Permanent Security Council ever voted to do anything militarily was when China was kicked out because of the transfer of power to Mao, and the Soviets were boycotting the kicking out of China, and there was only 3 members left, so they all went into Korea. The reason it's not supposed to be military is because it's supposed to be a center for peace, for discussion, for debate, for diplomacy, and that's where ECOSOC comes in, the Economic and Social Council. This has accomplished incredible things since 1945. Literacy rates all over the world, medical care all over the world, women's rights all over the world, economic development all over the world. That is ECOSOC. They've been able to do that because they don't have a strong military presence. And finally, the
Okay.
International Court of Justice. Okay, so the International Court of Justice is comprised of 9 countries elected for a 6-year term. They sit on this council, they sit on this bench, and they decide what international law should be. Now, here's the cast of the ICJ and the international system as a whole. The only countries that go to the ICJ to be judged choose to go to the ICJ. And the only countries that abide by the International Court of Justice decisions are those countries that have to, due to their military and economic position. Superpowers have never listened to the ICJ and will never listen to the ICJ because nobody's making them.
Wow. And who's going to be able to make them? Man, Jesus, bro. Like, listen, look, like I said, you know what I'm saying? I want to dive deep off in this with you guys to see what she had to say and stuff like this. You know, I only listened to the first few minutes when she said that, you know, the Donald Trump could only do this by his mind. Listen, look, we are deep off in this. This is crazy right here. Yeah, who's going to really make these superpowers do any damn thing? They have to abide by these United Nations laws because they want to do this as a country. And the leaders of these countries, want to, take their country and engage with these new United Nations laws and rules and strategical planning that they have going on here, man. Other than that, like who's going to, like she said, who's going to tell these superpowers what they what they're going to do?
The UN isn't a supranational authority. It wouldn't make sense for democracy if it was, right? Because we elect governments, our governments make decisions for our country. If the United Nations was allowed authority over our countries, it waters down and diminishes our democracy within our own country. But what that does establish is no consistent expectation or consistent law or consistent rules in the international system. It's kind of like the Wild West without the cool hats. Don't worry, I'm getting there. It all feels very depressing, but just give me another minute. The third thing I want to speak about is the international system. And we saw this happen yesterday at the WEF. The international system has always been set up so that rogue nations can be economically, militarily, culturally, and socially pressured in order to fall in line and actually trade fairly, be sure that they're not attacking other nations, and they're doing the right things when it comes to human rights, right? The problem is the US is the only remaining superpower. We used to have the Soviet Union balancing that out. I'm not advocating for the Soviet Union. I am simply saying when you have one left remaining superpower and they have all of the control, all of the military, economic, and cultural control, we have a problem because who's holding them to account? Let me be clear. This would be true of any state in this position with this much power.
Listen, look. So what she's basically saying here is that it's not just, the fact that the U.S. technically may be left to be the world superpower like this and things like that, which I think that also too, from things that I've seen and, just throughout gathering information across the internet and listening to other credible sources and stuff like that, like China is kind of, ramping up things and stuff like that. Definitely after we allocated our jobs and factories and stuff like that over to China, China has built themselves up very significantly. If you see modern day pictures and things like that, or information coming out of China, they have a very technological situation going on over there. Like, some of these cities are very pristine, things like that. It is what it is. They're working on becoming the next superpower, which in right now, they may not have what we have here in America to as far as the might and things like that, but of course they're working on it. So, I get what she's saying. It is what it is. And America may be still the last superpower to a degree. I think the rest of these countries that have the lead way and stuff like that are trying to work on changing that. That's just my opinion.
Any state. Nobody's gone up against the United States in any way, shape, or form. And when the United States under Trump is now threatening to annex Greenland, everybody's freaking out and starting to have conversations about what are we supposed to do. It was what I told you you should have done about a year ago. It's all about an alliance of middle powers. And let me be clear, it's not about taking down the United States. It's making the United States and this current administration understand that they don't have all the control, that if the next 20 countries allied themselves against the United States, as we started to see yesterday in the World Economic Forum, they won't be able to bully and negotiate individually with states and get everything they want. If we want power, we have to decide what is in our collective best interest to go up against this machine. If we don't, he will pick them off one by one by one. Greenland, Cuba, maybe Canada next, and I'm not into it.
So you heard what she had to say. It is what it is. Like I told you, I want to watch this thing all the way through with you guys. You form your own opinions. You get down in the comments. Let me know what you guys think about the whole scenario, what she's saying. It is what it is, though. But she's also, too, living over here in America and things like that. And she's able to, basically, carry herself, I mean, what other country is she going to go to? Let's just keep this real here. And, just be honest with the situation here, and I get it. She is spilling, certain facts, things like that. She's, basically telling us some things too, So, yeah, it is what it is here, man. And also, too, I think that's the reason why, we got pulled out of the UN situation and things like that. It is a crazy scenario here that we're in. Definitely in the modern age with what's going on. A lot of facts were spilled out in this video here or this broadcast. And yes, at the same time, though, too, like I said, too, as well, a lot of these other places are trying to put themselves in a position to, become powerful so they can, stipulate certain things and stuff like that. Definitely China and Russia and things like that, well, at one point, of course, we gave China the leg up when, back in the 90s, we sold all our infrastructure and factories and stuff like that off to China for, of course, cheaper labor and things like that when, they don't want to pay us over here as Americans. And we became a true, a big consumer nation instead of producing products like we did. Maytag, a lot of other products, our cars, things like that. So, yeah, it just is what it is here, man. Shout out to her, for, breaking certain things down, get down in the comments. Let me know what you guys are thinking here, right or wrong. I'm trying to figure this out too, because at the end of the day, she brought up a lot of things about the UN, different strategical programs that are going on, and people that need to answer to who and may not need to even answer to anybody. So, yeah, it's crazy out here, man. Show me some love down in the comments. Let me know what you guys think. People that are informed on this information, you know what I'm saying? I'm not claiming either side in this particular broadcast here. I'm trying to find out information too. So it is what it is, though. Shout out to all my subscribers. Mad love to y'all. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like, share, subscribe button. Make sure you ring that bell to be notified whenever I decide to post things. And like I always say,
and that, my friends, is the bottom line.
That, my friends, is the bottom line.